she was an American traitor, convicted leaker Chelsea Manning said, "No, I am not." Manning made only her second appearance since she was released from prison at a Creative Thinkers conference in Massachusetts yesterday. She told the group that she did the best she could in her circumstances to make an ethical decision when she released hundreds of thousands of pages of classified documents to WikiLeaks. She also talked about the controversy surrounding her recent disinvitation from Harvard as a visiting fellow, calling it, quote, as much an honored distinction as the fellowship itself. Okay, she was more direct on social media where she tweeted, "This is what a military police intel state looks like." What? No, it isn't. In another tweet, she said she was, quote, honored to be the first disinvited trans woman visiting Harvard fellow, and accused the school of silencing marginalized voices under CIA pressure. Oh, boy. Let's discuss. First, I think we should make a couple things clear. People who watch the show know I'm a huge proponent of free speech. This has nothing to do with free speech. I think Chelsea Manning should be able to talk about her experience, as terrible as I think it was, to as many people as will listen. There's a difference, though, between speech and appointing her to a prestigious, honored position where she's meant to pass on expertise to students. She's a convicted felon. Whether you think she's a traitor or not, court's already made that decision. And I just think that there are places and venues to elevate her role, and Harvard probably isn't one of them.
Well, a couple of things on my end, too. First, I'm not particularly bothered by the fact that she's a convicted felon. There are convicted felons who you can say, one could say shouldn't have been convicted. I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm just saying I don't think that's a blanket statement I would not make. I find Chelsea Manning herself to be utterly boring. I don't find anything she says particularly interesting.
You know what I always say? Like, the Chelsea Manning story is interesting. Yeah. She is the least interesting part of it.
Absolutely. I don't think Harvard should have caved and rescinded its invitation to her. Maybe it shouldn't have ever been extended to her, but I don't think they should have taken it back. I don't think them taking it back means we live in a police state.
No.
And her saying that is exactly why I find her kind of boring.
Saying that
tedious.
Immediately at a prestigious event, which she's immediately transmitted around the world.
Right. If we were living in a police state, she wouldn't be able to say we're living in a police state.
I also don't think she'd be out of prison.
No.
Fair point.
Right. Another fair point.
Come on.
Yeah.
Her prison sentence was commuted, and she is now a celebrated hero for a number of different communities, and free to move about the cabin, as it were.
I was actually one of the resident fellows in that program.
Yes, right.
At the Institute of Politics. I just want to point, not visiting resident, which meant you got a free apartment, so it was a pretty good gig. But, should they ever have extended the invitation? That's a question. But the point there is to bring in lots of different people, to talk to lots of different students, for the resident ones, to mentor them as well. And, last time I was on the show, we were talking to Ben Shapiro, who was going to speak at Berkeley with his free speech zone or whatever it was around his speech.
Right.
So I think you raised the right point. Colleges have, and universities, in my opinion, an obligation to invite controversial speakers to campus.
Absolutely invite her to speak.
But or whatever way you do that. But
no, not whatever way you do that. You don't invite someone who's a convicted felon to give a commencement address. You don't give someone who's a convicted felon and potentially a traitor to speak on behalf of the college as an expert in a certain field. The only thing she's an expert in is sharing classified documents.
She was not invited to give a commencement address. And what the visiting fellows do is teach a class, which isn't really a class, teach a one-day seminar and meet with students. But I think
you can soften the role as much as you want.
The real point here
is... But that's not the case.
No, Harvard made a decision, just like Berkeley did, and no one should back down then.
Steve, before we go, Charles, I want to hear your point. Before we go, I want to read the statement from Harvard, because within that statement, they acknowledged that this was exactly the problem. I see more clearly now that many people view a visiting fellow title as an honorific. So we should weigh that consideration when offering invitations. In particular, I think we should weigh for each potential visitor what members of the Kennedy School community could learn from that person's visit against the extent to which that person's conduct fulfills the values of public service to which we aspire. So this is Harvard admitting we should not have invited someone to assume this position, which by many is interpreted as an honor.
Anytime someone's invited to speak at a school, whether it's Berkeley or Harvard, whether it's a visiting fellow or not, that is an honor.
No. Christine, I love you, but you can't keep equating Ben Shapiro and Chelsea Manning.
But it's this.
Ben Shapiro being invited to speak.
No, I'm not equating that.
And Chelsea Manning being asked to be a visiting fellow and therefore an expert.
Let me be clear. I'm not saying they're the same. I want to be clear, and I don't want to insult Mr. Shapiro. That's not what. Might be another time, but not today. Want to be clear. I reserve the right.
Fair enough.
But I'm just saying, on college campuses, there's this rush, and I credit for Berkeley for not doing it, though I'm not really sure what the zones were about, crushing to public pressure when there's disagreement. IOP, Institute of Politics, made a decision. They should have lived with the results.
Charles.
Well, no, I'm glad you said that about Ben Shapiro, because I was going to say that this attempt to cast this moderate Jewish, moderate centre-right thinker in some way is equivalent just because a bunch of so-called anti-fascists run around and burn things every time he says he wants lower taxes is abhorrent. But we've covered that. Look,
just back to what Andy said before about, like, I don't find Chelsea Manning particularly intriguing as an individual. I think the revelations are very interesting, and it seems like no one in the media was interested. The information that was brought out, and journalists should care about this stuff, was of American soldiers committing murder and it being covered up, of American officials trying to manipulate the UK Parliament, trying to manipulate, trying to spy on UN leaders. This is like really interesting stuff. This is why this guy's
journalists.
Okay, I'm not saying nobody cared.
But let me just point out that, secondly, there's a difference between espionage and whistleblowing. And for someone like me, I can look at Edward Snowden and what he did, which was discriminately take information to journalists who parsed through it and decided this is pertinent and this is not. What Chelsea Manning did, while Bradley Manning, was dump 750,000 documents at WikiLeaks door, not discriminately and not with the intention of caring about whether this was going to put soldiers in harm's way.
Snowden did a lot better at vetting, and he took it to a much more responsible journalist, and he did a better job. Okay, fine. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. We put these kids in a situation where they take an oath to the Constitution, and then we ask them to violate that oath. And we say, and he went into a hole for like 230 days to get that information out. I'm just not that ready to just say, okay, he's wrong for that. It's very complicated.
Well, you don't have to. Court's decided. You can like her now. You can appreciate what she did now, but it's been adjudicated.
And the defense that Chelsea Manning has put forward is not a good one. The defense was, I thought I was doing the right thing. Well, okay, but so did Benedict Arnold, right? We have to have a little more than that. You said that there was an oath taken to the Constitution, correct? But there was also an oath promised, which she broke. Not to do what she did.
She had to break one. That's a fact.
Well, she had to break one. That's fine.
Just like marriage, all the vows have to count.
But how about all the other ones who break the oath to the Constitution and just continue to do their job?
There are many ways, as we've established, to back away from a job you believe involves you violating the Constitution, which do not involve what Chelsea Manning did.
They also don't get the truth. They also don't get the truth out to journalists.
I do just want to point out she was acquitted of the charge of aiding the enemy. I am not comfortable calling her a traitor. That's all.
I am.
Traitor's not a legal term, though.
Next, the war of words.